Recently I built a LEGO Marvel mock that features Spider-Gwen and some cool New York architecture. In this video, I'm going to discuss some of the techniques, the ideas, and some other tips and tricks that went into building this mock. And I might even share a few instructions for different parts of this build too. Alright people, let's start at the beginning one last time. So we've got these New York streets with autumn leaves on the floor, and I wanted it to be autumn because, well, I was very much inspired by the scene in the very first Spider-Verse movie where Gwen is swinging through the autumn trees when we're first introduced to her as Spider-Gwen. There's something about the suit and those autumn colors behind it that just pops in all the right ways, so I wanted to emulate that in some fashion on this build. Now if you're curious, by the way, here's how I built this tree design. I used 3 of these Travis brick pieces and then 2 brown 1x1 plates under them. I then placed 1x6 plates around all of the edges there to form these sort of pillars. I then used some of these hollow studs and these round plates with bars sticking out of one side to make little tiny branches that you then stick the leaves on top of. I then placed a few of these branches around each side of the tree, and then I stacked another one of these things on top of the other one, repeated the process until I was happy with the rough size and shape of the tree. Oh, and then there's a bar sticking out on the very top of the tree here, and I put a few leaves on top of that, and the tree is all done. Now, of course, it's autumn, so there's a lot of leaves on the floor as well. Now, all of these leaves are actually attached onto the floor. They're not just kind of placed or resting there. When I take apart the road, you can see that these are placed onto snot bricks so that they're actually attached. Now, I do this on basically any mock that I make. I always lock things down like this. It's actually quite rare for me to just place a piece or a minifigure that isn't actually attached onto a stud. Now, the reason I do this is because it makes moving your builds so much easier. You don't have to constantly fix things because they fell over or whatever. Or, you know, if you like bump the table or something, you don't have to pick everything back up. Things don't move. Everything's just locked in place. It's easier, you know? Oh yeah, and while we're here, this is how I built the road. So when I take it apart like this, you can see that all of these pieces are placed on their side, and I actually placed a variety of plates as well as tiles here to make up this road. The edges of tiles look different to the edges of plates, as you can see here. So when you look at them on their side, you get that awesome looking texture. Now I did this on the road because I thought it just looked a lot more interesting. If this was just regular smooth bricks on their side, it might just look too plain and a little boring. So giving this road a bit of a texture makes it more visually appealing, and also, to be honest, it was way more fun to build it that way. Plus, maybe this is a bit of a stretch, but I guess it kind of works. These also almost kind of look like speed lines, so it kind of creates a bit more of an effect of motion as we see the criminal running away from Spider-Gwen. So it's kind of working on a couple levels there, I suppose. Onto the building now. We can see I did a somewhat similar thing on this building where I had a bunch of those reddish brown plates, but I interdispersed some dark brown plates too. You know, this kind of mimics the look of brickwork, and you know, these patches of dark brown look a little bit like kind of dirty or aged bricks of some kind. Plus that pop of dark brown, it just looks really nice. I also added in these lines of dark bluish grey under each level of the building, and this was because when I was looking at actual buildings in New York, that's kind of how the architecture looks, so I just did my best to replicate that. Also, a lot of, New York architecture has fire escapes on the building, so, it's just so iconic to New York, I had to put that in there. And I definitely recommend doing that, by the way. If you're building an actual physical location that exists in the real world, or honestly, even a fictional location, look up inspiration, look up source material, look up anything that relates to what you're physically building, and take as much inspiration as you can from that, and then just replicate it in Lego bricks as best you can. Oh, yeah, and then these blue and red birds you might have noticed at the top of the building. Yes, that is indeed an Easter egg for Spider-Man, because Spider-Man's suit, it's red and blue, so are these birds. You know it makes sense. Now let me show you how I built the window design on this building. I actually had a few people ask about this as well, so here you go. I got these window pieces, as well as some of these modified bricks with a stud on one side, as well as some jumpers too. Then using the same maths that we used on the tree before, we got these modified bricks, put 2 studs underneath it, and then it allows you to place stuff on the side. So here I placed these jumpers on the side, and then put the windows on top of those jumpers. I then built this substructure here, which is just 1x2 plates, 4 of them, and then a 1x4 plate is connecting all of those together, and then on top of that 1x4 plate we have a 1x4 tile. Now I had to use some of these 1x2 plates here because this little connection piece in the middle here, that's important. So now we can link all of these together and connect the windows into those middle connections that I was talking about before. And now we have this completed window design here, which allows for these windows to be placed just slightly sunk in. and also allows them to be placed on their side too. Reasonably easy to do. There is an interior on the bottom floor, which is just a couple of little minifigures in a cafe, but I wasn't really able to do an interior on the upper floors. But since these windows are see-through, you're going to see inside the building, so I had to kind of come up with some sort of solution for that. So my solution was fairly easy. I just built blinds in front of the windows so that you couldn't see inside. Now, these blinds are built using these profile bricks here because, you know, the look of the texture on the side of the profile brick kind of looks a little bit like blinds. So I thought that worked well. Oh yeah, and this awning design is simply just made with these 1x2 plates stacked together with the striped pattern like that, so it looks cool. Now these are attached onto the building using this specific piece. Now this piece comes in a larger accessory pack that you often see in certain Marvel and DC sets, much like this one for example. You can see the part that I use specifically in action on the set just here. It's a really helpful piece. In fact, I think all of these pieces in this, accessory pack thing that you get, they're all really cool and very helpful. And using that specific part for that awning design, it made building that awning design a lot easier. Now, another thing I did with this build, which I guess is a more advanced technique, if you want to call it that, I did my best to play with levels on this vignette. Now, as you can see, we have this tall building at the back of the mock that rises above everything else. We then have this tree which rests a little bit shorter, but adds some height towards the other side of the vignette. But yeah, it's not as tall as the building. Then I have this bridge that adds a vertical angle that rests at a height that is lower than the tree and the building. And finally we have this road which is on ground level, plus the sidewalk which is just like slightly higher, so that way the ground isn't just like totally flat and boring. So there's a bit of variation all throughout the build. We've got multiple levels all throughout the different sections here. Now the reason I did this is because it helps make the build a lot more visually interesting. If this was just a flat base plate with not much on it, it would just kind of be bland and one-dimensional, right? But if we have depth, variety, and multiple levels, there's far more for you to see, and your eye is more naturally drawn to all the different areas because it wants to look at everything. So if you want to make a diorama or a vignette like this in Lego, try not to build something that's just flat and one-dimensional. Play with levels by adding points of interest that rest at different locations, whether that's a vertical location or a horizontal location. Or maybe you want to make something asymmetrical so that your eye is drawn to look at both different sides. Or it could even just be as simple as adding a tree to your landscape. Just a little bit of height or a little bit of variation can make a build so much more visually pleasing to look at. And that's also why I tried my best, like with the road, for example. I didn't want it to just be plain old boring bricks on their side. I added texture to it. If you're building a vignette like this, do your best to add some sort of point of interest. Instead of just building a plain old boring road, what kind of technique can we add to it, or what kind of texture can we add to it that makes it a bit more interesting? Vignettes and any kind of Lego or Bionicle mock for that matter, they're not as interesting if they don't have cool techniques to them, or just some sort of thing that you haven't seen before. That can be as simple as just like a cool popping color scheme that you've not really seen on other builds. When you're making something, try to find ways that it can be different from other builds that you've seen before. Or just play around with new techniques, because not only is that a fun thing to do, it makes your mock stand out a little bit more and makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. Well, that's the sort of stuff I like to do with vignettes. Everyone builds differently, and if you don't want to do that on your builds, don't. You don't have to. But that's the sort of stuff that I like to do to make it a bit more fun when I'm building. So hopefully some of those ideas can help you out with your own future builds. And hopefully some of the other instructions and tips and tricks that I shared give you some inspiration for your own future vignettes too. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you... I know you guys are going to ask this. You thought I was about to end the video? Not quite. The legs on Spider-Gwen. You might be like, whoa, 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 where does that come from? The official Spider-Gwen figure, there's no leg printing. Where'd you get that from? Unfortunately, that is a bootleg piece that I picked up at a toy fair, so that is not official Lego. Sorry about that. I try my best to not use non-official Lego pieces on mocks, but this looks too good. I always thought the Spider-Gwen figure was lacking without the printing on the feet there, so had to include that here on the mock, because man, the figure looks so much cooler with leg printing. Anyway, as I was saying, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Happy building, and bye for now.